Welcome to our channel, where every story explores the depths of human emotion, the complexities of power, and the unexpected turns that change lives forever. Today, we bring you a tale from the heart of Sicily, a story about humiliation, redemption, and the dangerous world of honor and respect. If you enjoy dramatic narratives that pull you into another world, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Your support means everything to us. Now, let's dive into today's story. Imagine that you're standing in a crowded wedding hall, surrounded by people who came to celebrate what should have been the happiest day of your life. Imagine the whispers growing louder, the laughter becoming sharper, the eyes of everyone you know fixed on you. Not with joy, but with pity and mockery. Imagine your groom, the man you trusted with your future, openly messaging another woman while standing beside you at the altar. And then imagine the moment when the doors burst open and a man you've never met walks in and claims you as his own in front of everyone. This is where Elena's story begins. Not with love, but with humiliation that would become salvation, and salvation that would become something far more complicated. The afternoon sun hung low over Santa Lucia, casting long shadows through the narrow streets of the old Sicilian village. The air smelled of salt from the nearby Mediterranean, mixed with the scent of jasmine that climbed the ancient stone walls. It was Saturday, and the church of San Michele had been decorated with white roses and cream-colored ribbons, modest but beautiful, reflecting the budget Elena's family could barely afford. Elena Rossi stood in the small room behind the church, her hands trembling as she adjusted the lace veil that had belonged to her grandmother. At 26, she had waited longer than most women in the village to marry. Marco Bellini, her fiancé, worked at his father's auto repair shop. He wasn't wealthy, wasn't particularly handsome, but he had promised her stability. In a place where opportunities were scarce and most young people fled to the mainland for better prospects, stability meant everything. Her mother, Francesca, fussed with the train of Elena's simple white dress. "You look beautiful, tesoro," she whispered, though her eyes betrayed worry. The Rossi family had invested their savings into this wedding. Not a fortune by any means, but everything they could spare. The reception would be held at the old community hall near the piazza, the one with the yellowed walls and flickering lights that the municipality never bothered to fix. "Mama, do you think he loves me?" Elena asked suddenly, her voice barely audible. Francesca's hands stilled. She looked at her daughter's reflection in the cracked mirror. "Love grows with time, Elena. Respect and commitment. Those are what matter." It wasn't the answer Elena wanted, but it was the answer she expected. In Santa Lucia, marriages were practical arrangements as much as romantic unions. You married someone from the village, someone your family knew, someone who could provide. Dreams of passion and grand romance belonged to movies and novels, not to the daughters of fishermen and shopkeepers. The ceremony proceeded as planned. Father Giuseppe spoke the traditional words in his gravelly voice, the same words he'd spoken at dozens of weddings in this same church. Elena's hands were cold, despite the warm June air filtering through the open doors. Marco stood beside her, his cheap suit pulling tight across his shoulders, his eyes fixed not on her face, but on the phone he kept checking in his jacket pocket. The first real moment of unease came during the vows. As Father Giuseppe prompted Marco to recite his commitment, a notification sound, loud and jarring, echoed through the church. Several guests turned, some frowning, others exchanging glances. Marco pulled out his phone, glanced at the screen, and a smile flickered across his face before he caught himself and shoved it back into his pocket. "Marco," Father Giuseppe said sternly, "this is a sacred moment." "Sorry, Father. Work emergency," Marco muttered, though the lie was transparent. Auto shops didn't have emergencies at 6 in the evening on a Saturday. Elena felt her stomach tighten, but she forced a smile. This was her wedding day. She wouldn't let anxiety ruin it. But the phone buzzed again during the exchange of rings, and again as Father Giuseppe blessed their union. Each time, Marco's fingers twitched toward his pocket, his attention divided between the sacrament and whatever message kept demanding his attention. By the time they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Elena's smile had become a mask. The guests threw rice and called out blessings, but she could see the questions in their eyes, hear the whispers starting even before they reached the church doors. The reception hall of Santa Lucia was exactly as Elena had last seen it. Tired, outdated, desperately trying to appear festive, with strands of lights that blinked unevenly and tablecloths that couldn't quite hide the worn wood beneath. The caterer, Signora Benedetti, had prepared her usual spread: pasta with tomato sauce, roasted chicken, vegetables that had seen better days, and a wedding cake that looked impressive from a distance, but whose frosting tasted slightly off up close. About 80 guests filled the space: relatives, neighbors, Marco's friends from the shop, Elena's former classmates who hadn't yet escaped to Rome or Milan. A local band, consisting of 3 elderly men, played traditional Sicilian folk songs on worn instruments, their enthusiasm compensating for their lack of precision. It was 6:45 p.m. when Elena first noticed Marco's behavior becoming impossible to ignore. They were seated at the head table, the spotlight on them quite literally. A single bright bulb hung above their seats, casting harsh shadows. Marco had his phone out openly now, typing rapidly, occasionally laughing at whatever he was reading. He barely touched his food. "Marco," Elena whispered, leaning close so others wouldn't hear. "Please, people are watching." "Just give me a minute," he said without looking up. "It's important. More important than our wedding." He finally glanced at her, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Don't start, Elena. You're always so dramatic." The words stung like a slap. Elena pulled back, her throat tight. Across the table, Marco's friend Gianni caught her eye and quickly looked away, embarrassment evident on his face. He'd seen the exchange. Others would too. The first dance should have been romantic, a moment for the newlyweds to hold each other while guests watched and remembered their own weddings. Instead, it became excruciating. Marco held Elena with one arm while his other hand kept his phone visible, checking it repeatedly. The music played, people watched, and Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. "Who is she?" Elena finally asked, her voice breaking. "What? The woman you keep texting. Who is she?" Marco's jaw tightened. "You're imagining things. I can see her name on your screen. Valentina. Who is Valentina, Marco?" "A friend from Messina." "It's nothing." "Nothing? On our wedding day, you can't put your phone away for nothing?" "You know what, Elena? This is exactly why I—" He stopped himself, but the damage was done. The words hung between them, unspoken but understood. "This is exactly why I need someone else." The music ended. Polite applause followed. Elena stepped away from Marco and walked quickly toward the bathroom, her vision blurred with tears. Behind her she heard the whispers starting in earnest now, no longer bothering with discretion. "Did you see that? The phone, during the ceremony too. Poor Elena. My cousin knows a Valentina from Messina, works at that hotel, the fancy one. Marco was always like this. His father warned Elena's family." In the bathroom, a cramped space with a flickering light and cracked tiles, Elena gripped the sink and tried to breathe. This was supposed to be her day, her one perfect day. She'd accepted a modest wedding, accepted that Marco wasn't a romantic, accepted that their life together would be ordinary. But she hadn't imagined this humiliation. Her mother appeared in the doorway, face pale. "Elena, Cara, come back out. Don't let them see you like this." "Mama, I can't. Everyone knows. Everyone's talking." "Then hold your head high. Show them you're stronger than his disrespect." But Elena didn't feel strong. She felt foolish. She felt like every doubt she'd pushed aside over the past year had been justified. Marco's late nights, his vague excuses, the way he'd grown distant during their engagement. She'd told herself it was cold feet, normal pre-wedding stress. She'd been wrong. When Eleanor returned to the main hall, the atmosphere had shifted. It was 7:30 p.m. now, and the guests had divided into two camps. Some, mostly Elena's family and older relatives, tried to maintain normalcy, dancing, eating, pretending nothing was wrong. Others, particularly Marco's friends and the younger crowd, had gathered around him at a corner table. They were looking at his phone, laughing, making comments Elena couldn't hear but could imagine. She stood near the cake table, alone, her white dress suddenly feeling like a costume she was wearing in a play she hadn't auditioned for. Her father, Antonio, approached with a glass of wine. He was a quiet man, weathered by years of working on fishing boats, and he'd never been comfortable with words. "I can take you home, Piccola," he offered softly. "You don't have to stay. And let everyone talk about how the bride left her own wedding. No, Papa, I'll stay." That boy, Antonio's hands clenched. I should have listened to my instincts. His family's reputation. What reputation? Her father hesitated, then shook his head. It doesn't matter now. What's done is done. But it did matter. Elena had heard whispers about the Bellini family. Nothing concrete, just murmurs about connections, about the way Marco's uncle ran his construction business, about money that flowed through their hands without clear sources. In Sicily, such whispers often meant ties to networks people didn't name directly. But Eleanor had dismissed it all as village gossip, the kind of jealous speculation that plagued anyone who seemed to have slightly more than their neighbors. By 7:45 p.m., the situation had deteriorated beyond salvage. Marco was now openly showing his phone to his friends, and Elena caught glimpses of the screen, photos of a woman with long dark hair and a bright smile, Valentina. She was beautiful in the way women in magazines were beautiful, polished and confident. Everything Elena, in her simple dress and modest life, was not. Someone dropped a glass. The sharp crack of breaking crystal cut through the music and conversation. Everyone turned to look. One of Marco's friends, drunk and thoughtless, had knocked over a wine glass while laughing at something on the phone. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood. Sorry, the friend slurred. "Marco, show them the one from last weekend." "Shut up, Paolo," Marco hissed, but it was too late. "What's from last weekend?" Elena heard herself ask, her voice carrying further than she intended. The music stopped. Everyone was looking now. Marco finally pocketed his phone and stood. "Elena, don't make a scene." "A scene? You've been texting another woman throughout our entire wedding, and you're worried about me making a scene. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Explain it to me. Explain to everyone here who came to celebrate our marriage why you can't stop messaging someone named Valentina." The hall had gone completely silent. Even the band members stood frozen, unsure whether to keep playing or disappear. Elena's mother covered her face with her hands. Marco's father, Salvatore, a thick-necked man with suspicious eyes, rose from his seat. "Elena, calm yourself," Salvatore commanded. "You're hysterical." "Hysterical? My husband is cheating on me on our wedding day, and I'm hysterical for noticing." "Cheating is a strong word," Marco said, his tone defensive. "We're just friends. You're overreacting like you always do." "Like I always do? We've been married for less than 2 hours." Someone laughed, a nervous, inappropriate sound that died quickly when others glared. Elena felt the room spinning. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be her life. Marco took a step toward her, his expression hardening. "You know what, Elena? Maybe I need someone to talk to because you're exhausting. Always worried, always questioning, always—" The rest of his sentence was cut off by the sound of doors slamming open. Everyone turned. It was exactly 7 p.m. The entrance to the reception hall, large wooden doors that had stood in the same spot for 100 years, had been thrown open with such force that they bounced against the walls. The sound echoed like a gunshot, freezing everyone in place. A man stepped through. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled out a tailored charcoal suit that must have cost more than every outfit in the room combined. His dark hair was swept back, showing a strong face with a straight nose, sharp cheekbones, and eyes so dark they looked black in the dim light. He couldn't have been more than 35, but he carried himself with the authority of someone much older. Around his neck, barely visible beneath his white shirt, Elena glimpsed what looked like a scar, old and faded but unmistakably from a blade. But it wasn't the man himself that caused the collective intake of breath. It was the two men flanking him. Both wore dark suits, similar to their companions, but theirs were slightly less refined, more functional. More importantly, both had their hands resting visibly on guns holstered at their sides. They weren't trying to hide the weapons. They wanted everyone to see. The stranger walked into the hall with measured steps, his expensive shoes clicking against the worn tile floor. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the absolute silence that had fallen. He surveyed the room like a general surveying a battlefield, his gaze moving from table to table, person to person, missing nothing. Behind him, his two guards took positions on either side of the door. They didn't move, didn't speak, but their presence radiated threat. Someone at the back, Elena never saw who, whispered, "Madonna Santa." The stranger's eyes finally settled on Elena. He walked directly toward her, people instinctively moving aside to clear his path. Even Marco stepped back, his earlier bravado evaporating like morning mist. Elena stood frozen. She couldn't have moved if she wanted to. The man stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive, subtle, nothing like the cheap aftershave Marco wore. Up close, she could see his eyes weren't entirely black but a very dark brown, and they were studying her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she couldn't. His fingers gently lifted her chin. His touch was surprisingly soft, almost tender. "In front of everyone here," he said, his voice deep and accented with the particular rhythm of Palermo, different from Santa Lucia's rural dialect. "No one touches you. From this moment, you belong to me." Elena's mind went blank. She couldn't process what was happening. This man, this stranger, was claiming her, here, now, in front of her family, her guests, her husband. The room remained frozen in shocked silence. Then Marco found his voice. "Who the hell are you? Get out of here before—" He didn't finish. One of the guards shifted slightly, just enough to make the gun at his hip more visible. Marco went pale and silent. The stranger never looked away from Elena. "What is your name?" Elena," she stammered. "Elena Rossi. I mean, Bellini. I just got married." "No," he said simply. "Not anymore." He turned then, addressing the room at large. His voice carried easily, commanding attention without needing to shout. "This wedding is over. Everyone will leave quietly. No one will speak of what happened here. The bride is under my protection now." "Protection?" Elena's father found his courage, stepping forward despite his wife trying to pull him back. "Who are you to come into my daughter's wedding and make demands? This is insanity." For the first time, the stranger smiled. It wasn't a warm expression. "I am someone who keeps his promises, signore. I promise you that your daughter will never be humiliated again. I promise you that everyone who witnessed her shame today will forget it, and I promise you that anyone who speaks against her will answer to me." "Answer to who?" Salvatore Bellini demanded, puffing up his chest in false courage. "You think you can walk in here with your guns and your threats? I have connections too. I know people in Catania, in Messina. I know." The stranger's voice was casual, almost bored. "You know Tommaso Greco in Catania. He owes you money for a construction job. And in Messina, you occasionally do business with the Lucchesi family. Small favors, nothing important." Salvatore's face went from red to white. "How do you—" "I know everything about everyone in this room. I know that Signora Benedetti," he nodded toward the caterer. uses expired ingredients. I know that Father Giuseppe has a gambling problem he believes is secret. I know that you, Signore Bellini, help launder money through your construction company, small amounts, not enough to attract real attention, but enough. The room seemed to shrink. Several people moved toward the exits, wanting to leave, but afraid to draw attention by moving first. But most importantly, the stranger continued, looking back at Elena, I know that this marriage was a mistake from the beginning. It ends tonight. You can't just... Marco started. I can. I am. The stranger finally looked at Marco directly, and whatever Marco saw in that gaze made him stumble backward. You will sign whatever papers are necessary for an annulment. You will tell everyone the marriage was never consummated. You will do this within 3 days, or I will show your father's associates what I know about his business. Am I clear? Marco nodded, unable to speak. The stranger turned back to Elena, and to her shock, his expression softened slightly. You have a choice. You can stay here married to a fool who brought his mistress's photos to his wedding day, or you can come with me. I promise you will be safe. I promise you will be respected. I promise no one will dare humiliate you again. But I don't know you, Elena whispered. I don't even know your name. My name is Dante Caruso. I am from Palermo, and yes, I am what people whisper about in villages like this. But I'm also a man who believes in honor, in protecting what is mine, and in punishing those who deserve punishment. What do you want from me? Elena felt tears sliding down her face, mixing with her ruined makeup. Why would you do this? Dante's thumb gently wiped away a tear, the gesture startlingly intimate. Because 3 months ago, your grandmother saved my life. Elena blinked. My grandmother? Nonna Sofia? She found me bleeding in an alley in Palermo. I'd been shot, left for dead by men who thought they could challenge my authority. Your grandmother, she didn't know who I was, didn't care. She called for help, stayed with me until the ambulance came, even though it was dangerous for her. Later, I learned she'd been visiting her sister, that she lived here in Santa Lucia. I tried to repay her, but she refused everything I offered. Eleanor's mind reeled. Nonna Sofia had mentioned visiting her sister in Palermo, but had never said anything about finding a wounded man. Then again, her grandmother had always been surprisingly tough, despite her small frame and kind demeanor. She told me, Dante continued, that her granddaughter was getting married soon to a local boy. She seemed sad about it, though she tried to hide it. She said, I pray he treats her well, but I have my doubts. And I promised her then that if her granddaughter ever needed help, I would provide it. She died last month. I know, Elena interrupted, fresh tears coming. Heart attack. She died in her sleep. Before she died, she made me promise again. She said, watch over Elena. She deserves better than what she's settling for. So I've been watching. I have people everywhere, Signora. They told me about today, about your husband's disrespect. I came to honor my promise to a woman who saved my life without expecting anything in return. The explanation hung in the air. Elena looked around the room, at her mother's frightened face, at her father's confusion, at Marco's relief that the stranger's attention had shifted away from him, at the guests who would gossip about this night for years. If I go with you, Elena said slowly, what happens to me? You will live in my house in Palermo. You will have your own room, your own space. You will be under my protection, which means no one will dare bother you. In time, when the annulment is finalized, you will be free to choose your own path. Stay, leave, marry someone else if you wish. But you will do so as someone who has seen another life, who understands that Santa Lucia is not the entire world. And if I refuse, if I choose to stay, Dante stepped back, giving her physical space. Then I leave, and you live with the consequences of marrying a man who brought his lover's photos to his wedding. But I will still ensure the annulment happens, still ensure that you have legal freedom. That much I owe to your grandmother. Elena's legs felt weak. Behind her she heard her mother sob. This was insane. This was like something from a movie or a fever dream. Men like Dante Caruso didn't walk into weddings and claim brides. Things like this didn't happen in real life. Except they did. In Sicily, the old rules still applied in ways outsiders didn't understand. Power, honor, debts paid, and promises kept. These weren't abstract concepts, but the foundations of survival. Elena thought of her grandmother's kind face, her knowing eyes. Nonna Sofia had always seen through people, had always known Elena's doubts about Marco. She'd tried to warn her granddaughter gently, but Elena hadn't listened. She'd been too afraid of being alone, too worried about disappointing her family by calling off the engagement. And now this stranger, this dangerous, powerful stranger, was offering her an escape from the humiliation that would otherwise define the rest of her life in Santa Lucia. "Can I say goodbye to my parents?" Elena asked quietly. Dante nodded. "Of course." Elena walked to where her parents stood. Her father looked torn between anger and fear. Her mother was crying openly now, mascara running down her face. "Mama, Papa, I'm sorry. I know this is crazy. I know you don't understand, but I can't stay here. Not after today. Everyone saw, everyone knows." "You're going with a criminal," her father said harshly. "A man who brings guns to a wedding. Madonna, Elena, what would your grandmother think?" "Papa, he said Nonna Sofia saved his life, that she asked him to protect me." Her mother grabbed her hand, squeezing tight. "Sofia never mentioned, but she was secretive about her last trip to Palermo. She came back different, more at peace somehow." Francesca looked at Dante, who waited patiently several feet away. "If what he says is true, if your grandmother trusted him." "She did," Elena said firmly, surprising herself with her certainty. "I don't know how I know, but I believe him." "Then go," her father said gruffly, pulling both women into a tight embrace. "But you call us every day, every single day. And if anything happens that you don't like, you come home immediately. Promise me." "I promise, Papa." When Elena turned back to Dante, he extended his hand. She took it, her fingers small in his larger grasp. His skin was warm, his hold steady. "We should leave now," Dante said. "The longer we stay, the more complicated this becomes." As they walked toward the door, the crowd parted like water. Some people couldn't look at her, others stared openly. Elena held her head high, just as her mother had advised, though her heart hammered in her chest. Near the exit, Marco stepped into their path. He'd recovered some courage, or perhaps foolishness. "Elena, you can't seriously. This is ridiculous. You're my wife." Dante moved so fast, Elena barely saw it. One moment Marco was standing there, the next he was against the wall with Dante's forearm across his throat. Not choking him, but close. "Listen carefully," Dante said, his voice deadly calm. "You will never approach her again. You will never speak to her again. You will sign the annulment papers and consider yourself fortunate that I don't break both your legs for the disrespect you showed. Do you understand?" Marco nodded frantically. Dante released him and turned back to Elena without another glance, as if Marco no longer existed. Outside, 3 black Mercedes sedans waited with their engines running, just as the details had described. The night air was cooler now, carrying the salt smell from the sea. Streetlights cast orange pools of illumination on the narrow street. Dante opened the door of the middle car himself, gesturing for Elena to enter. She climbed in, the leather seats impossibly soft compared to the worn fabric of her father's old Fiat. Dante slid in beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. One guard took the driver's seat, the other the passenger side. The remaining guards distributed themselves between the other 2 vehicles. As the convoy pulled away, Elena looked back at the reception hall. People had spilled out onto the street, watching the cars disappear. She saw her mother waving frantically, her father's arm around her shoulders. She saw Marco standing in the doorway, his white shirt bright against the darkness behind him. Then they turned a corner, and Santa Lucia disappeared from view. "Are you all right?" Dante asked. In the close confines of the car, Elena could see him more clearly. There were fine lines around his eyes, suggesting he smiled more than his serious demeanor indicated. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow. His hands, resting on his knees, were well kept, but showed the calluses of someone who'd worked with them. "I don't know," Elena admitted. "I don't understand what's happening. This morning I woke up thinking I knew exactly what my life would be. And now you're in a car with a stranger driving to a city you've rarely visited. It's disorienting. That's one word for it." Elena laughed, but it came out shaky, near tears. "My wedding dress is ruined, my makeup is everywhere, and I'm fairly certain I just left my husband with a Mafia boss." "Don Caruso," the driver corrected politely. "Not just a boss, the Don of Palermo." Elena's eyes widened. Even in isolated Santa Lucia, people knew what that title meant. The Don controlled everything: businesses, territory, relationships between families. He wasn't just powerful, he was power itself in Palermo. "Why didn't you say that before?" Elena asked Dante. "In the hall, you just said your name. Would it have made a difference? Would you have been less frightened or more?" Dante shrugged. "My title is useful for instilling fear in men like your former groom. But for you, I wanted to be simply Dante, a man honoring a debt to your grandmother." "My former groom," Elena repeated. "We were married less than 3 hours. You were never truly married. A wedding requires mutual respect and commitment. What happened in that hall was theater, and the show is over now." They drove in silence for several minutes, leaving Santa Lucia behind and heading north toward Palermo. The road wound through dark countryside, occasionally passing through small villages where lights glowed in windows, families settling in for Saturday evening. Elena found herself studying Dante from the corner of her eye. He sat relaxed but alert, occasionally glancing at his phone or out the window. He didn't seem concerned about what they'd just done, about the chaos they'd left behind. "What happens when we reach Palermo?" Elena finally asked. "We go to my home. I'll have my housekeeper, Signora Marta, show you to a guest room. You can rest, clean up, change clothes. Tomorrow we can discuss details, but tonight you need to recover from what must have been a terrible day. Don't you have a wife? Won't she be upset that you're bringing home a woman in a wedding dress?" Dante smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face. "No wife. I was engaged once, many years ago. She died before the wedding. Since then, I've been careful about personal attachments." "I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. And it taught me that life is short, that honor matters, that protecting the people who deserve protection is more important than maintaining comfortable lies." The journey took about an hour. As they entered Palermo's outskirts, Elena saw the city lights spreading before them, so much brighter and more numerous than anything in Santa Lucia. The streets grew wider, the buildings taller. They passed through neighborhoods that gradually became more affluent, the cars parked along the streets, newer and more expensive. Finally, they turned into a gated property. The gates opened automatically, clearly expecting them. A long driveway led to a villa that made Elena catch her breath. It was beautiful in the traditional Sicilian style. Pale stone walls, arched windows, a terracotta roof that seemed to glow in the exterior lighting. Gardens surrounded it, well maintained even in the darkness. "Welcome to Palazzo Caruso," Dante said as the car stopped in front of the main entrance. "It's been in my family for 4 generations." A woman appeared in the doorway, 60-ish, grey hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a simple black dress and apron. Her face was kind, but curious as she took in Elena's wedding dress and obvious distress. "Signora Marta," Dante greeted her as he helped Elena from the car. "This is Signorina Elena Rossi. She'll be staying with us for the foreseeable future. Please prepare the blue room for her." "Of course, Don Caruso." Marta's eyes widened slightly at Elena's appearance, but she said nothing, only gesturing for them to follow her inside. The interior of the palazzo was even more impressive than the exterior. High ceilings with exposed wooden beams, marble floors that gleamed, art on the walls that Elena suspected was worth more than her parents' house. But it wasn't ostentatious. Everything was chosen with taste and care, creating an atmosphere of understated wealth. "This way, signorina," Marta said gently, leading Elena up a wide staircase. "I'll show you to your room and then bring some tea and something to eat. I imagine you haven't had dinner." Elena realized she was starving. She'd been too nervous to eat at the reception, and before that, had she eaten lunch? She couldn't remember. The blue room was named for its color scheme, soft blues and whites, creating a peaceful, almost ethereal atmosphere. A large bed dominated the space, covered in what looked like expensive linens. French doors opened onto a small balcony overlooking the gardens. A private bathroom adjoined the room, complete with a modern shower and a deep, soaking tub. "I'll find you some clothes for tonight," Marta said. "Tomorrow we can arrange proper shopping, but for now you need to get out of that dress and rest." When Marta left, Elena stood in the middle of the room, feeling lost. This morning she'd woken in her childhood bedroom in her parents' modest house. Tonight she was in a palazzo in Palermo, the guest of one of the most powerful men in Sicily. The absurdity of it hit her all at once, and she started laughing, slightly hysterical laughter that turned into tears. She cried for the first time since the bathroom at her wedding, real deep sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for the humiliation, for the wasted time with Marco, for the disappointed dreams, for her grandmother who'd somehow orchestrated this rescue from beyond the grave. When the tears finally stopped, Elena felt oddly cleansed. She unzipped the wedding dress, cheap satin that had seemed so elegant when she bought it, and let it pool on the floor. She would never wear it again. She never wanted to see it again. The shower was scalding hot, washing away the makeup, the sweat, the perfume, the last physical traces of the worst day of her life. She stood under the spray until her skin turned pink, until she felt like perhaps she could be someone new, someone other than the girl who'd been mocked at her own wedding. When she emerged wrapped in a thick towel, she found pajamas laid out on the bed, soft cotton, clearly expensive, in a size that was close enough to fit. There was also a tray with tea, bread, cheese, fruit, and a small carafe of red wine. Elena ate mechanically, her mind still trying to process everything. Through the French doors, she could hear the night sounds of Palermo, distant traffic, a dog barking, someone singing. The city was alive in a way Santa Lucia never was. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, pulling the bathrobe tighter. Dante entered, changed from his suit into casual pants and a white linen shirt. He looked younger this way, less intimidating. "I wanted to make sure you had everything you need." "Yes, thank you. Signora Marta was very kind. She's been with my family since I was a boy. She'll take good care of you." He paused in the doorway, seeming uncertain for the first time since Elena had met him. "I know this is strange for you, frightening even, but I meant what I said. You're safe here. No one will hurt you or pressure you or—" "Why?" Elena interrupted. "I understand about your debt to my grandmother, but this is beyond repaying a debt. You've made an enemy of the Bellini family, disrupted a wedding, brought me to your home. Why go so far?" Dante was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Your grandmother and I talked for several hours in the hospital after my surgery. She told me about you, about your dreams when you were young. You wanted to be a teacher, to travel, to see the world beyond your village. But life had other plans. Your father's accident that left him unable to work as much, the family's financial struggles, the limited opportunities. She said you'd given up your dreams piece by piece until you convinced yourself that marrying Marco was enough." Elena felt fresh tears threatening. "She told you all that? She was worried about you. She said you had a light in you that was dimming, and she didn't know how to help it shine again. When I asked if there was anything I could do, she made me promise to watch over you. At the time, I thought it would mean checking occasionally that you were safe, maybe helping with money if needed. But then I had my people look into Marco Bellini, and I learned he'd been having an affair with Valentina Russo for 8 months. I learned he only proposed to you because his father wanted him to settle down, wanted him to marry someone respectable from a good family to improve their reputation. I learned he'd been planning to continue the affair after the wedding, that he'd rented an apartment in Messina where he met Valentina twice a week. Elena closed her eyes. She'd suspected Marco wasn't faithful, but hearing the details confirmed made it worse somehow. I couldn't let your grandmother's granddaughter be trapped in that marriage, Dante continued. I couldn't let him destroy what was left of your light. So yes, I went far, perhaps too far, but I don't regret it. What do you want from me in return? Elena asked, opening her eyes to look at him directly. Men like you don't do favors without expecting something back. Dante smiled sadly. Men like me? You've known me for 3 hours, Elena. You don't know what kind of man I am. You're a mafia boss, a don. You control territories and businesses and people. You have guards with guns. You make threats that terrify grown men. Those facts tell me something. They tell you that I'm powerful and dangerous, both true. But they don't tell you that I sponsor scholarships for children whose parents can't afford university. They don't tell you that I refuse to allow drug trafficking in my territory, even though it would be profitable. They don't tell you that I personally visited the hospital room of every man injured in a recent construction accident at one of my properties to ensure their families were being supported. Elena studied him. This contradiction of a man. Why tell me this? Why do you care what I think of you? Because I need you to understand that while I operate outside the law, I have my own code, and part of that code is that I don't harm innocents. I keep my promises, and I protect what needs protecting. Right now, that's you. For how long? As long as necessary, until you're strong enough to protect yourself. He moved toward the door, then paused. Get some rest, Elena. Tomorrow will be easier. After he left, Elena lay in the impossibly comfortable bed, staring at the ceiling. The day had started with her waking up to birds singing outside her window in Santa Lucia, nervous but excited about her wedding. It was ending with her, as the house guest of a crime lord in Palermo, her marriage effectively over before it had truly begun. The strangest part was that despite the insanity of the situation, despite knowing she should be terrified, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Maybe life beyond Santa Lucia was possible. Maybe there were other paths she could take. Maybe her grandmother had given her one last gift, the courage to start over. Sleep came eventually, deep and dreamless. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the French doors and the sound of birds in the garden. For a moment, she forgot where she was, expecting to see her childhood bedroom's familiar walls. Then reality crashed back, and she sat up abruptly. A clock on the bedside table read 9:30 a.m. She'd slept late, exhausted by yesterday's emotional turmoil. Someone had left fresh clothes on the chair, casual pants and a soft sweater, again in approximately her size. After dressing, Elena ventured out of the room. The palazzo was quiet except for distant sounds from what she assumed was the kitchen. She followed the smell of coffee and found Signora Marta preparing breakfast in a large modern kitchen that contrasted with the traditional decor of the rest of the house. "Good morning, Signorina," Marta greeted her warmly. "Coffee? Breakfast? Please, and you can call me Eleanor." "Eleanor, then. Sit, you must be hungry." As Marta prepared a plate of pastries, fruit and eggs, Elena asked, "Is Don Caruso awake?" "Oh, he's been up since dawn. Always is. He's in his office now, handling business. He said to tell you to make yourself at home, explore the gardens if you like. He'll speak with you this afternoon." "Does he often bring unexpected house guests home?" Marta laughed. "Never. In all the years I've worked here, you're the first." It caused quite a stir among the staff. But Don Caruso explained the situation. "Well, the basics anyway. We all understand. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman from what he told us." "You didn't know her?" No, but Don Caruso spoke of her with such respect. He doesn't respect many people, so that told us all we needed to know. After breakfast, Eleanor did explore the gardens. They were extensive and beautiful, with winding paths, fountains, and small groves of lemon and orange trees. At the far end, she found a bench overlooking the city, Palermo spread out below in the morning light. She sat there for over an hour, trying to organize her thoughts. She needed to call her parents. They'd be worried sick. She needed to think about her future, about what came next. The annulment would take time to finalize, but she couldn't stay here indefinitely, could she? "Beautiful view, isn't it?" a voice said behind her. Elena turned to find Dante approaching, dressed more casually today, in dark jeans and a navy shirt. He looked tired, she noticed, shadows under his eyes. "I should call my parents," Elena said as he sat beside her on the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. "They must be frantic. I had one of my people call your father last night to confirm you arrived safely. But yes, call them yourself. They need to hear your voice." He handed her a phone. "Use this." "Your old phone? I assume Marco had the number?" "Yes." "Then don't use it anymore. This one is clean, secure. I've already programmed your parents' number in." Eleanor took the phone, struck by the thoughtfulness. "Thank you. There are other things we need to discuss, practical matters, but first, how are you feeling?" "Confused, overwhelmed, but also—" She searched for the right word. "Relieved? Is that terrible? Should I feel guilty for being relieved that my marriage ended?" "You should feel whatever you actually feel. Guilt serves no purpose when the marriage never should have happened in the first place." Dante leaned back against the bench, his face turned toward the sun. "I spoke with my lawyer this morning. The annulment paperwork will be filed tomorrow. Marco has agreed to cooperate. His father made sure of that. Within a few weeks, legally, the marriage will never have existed. And then what? That depends on you. What do you want, Eleanor?" It was such a simple question, but Elena couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked it. What did she want? Not what her parents wanted, not what was practical or expected, but what she actually wanted for herself. "I don't know," she admitted. "I gave up thinking about what I wanted years ago." "Then perhaps it's time to start thinking about it again." Dante stood, offering his hand to help her up. "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led her back through the gardens to a different part of the palazzo, down a hallway she hadn't explored, to a room with double doors. When he opened them, Elena gasped. It was a library, not large, but filled floor to ceiling with books. Comfortable chairs, good lighting, a desk by the window. It smelled of old paper and leather, that particular scent of a room devoted to reading. "My mother's library," Dante explained. "She was a teacher before she married my father. She loved books, loved learning. She used to say that education was the one thing no one could take from you, no matter what else you lost." Eleanor walked slowly around the room, running her fingers along the spines. Italian literature, philosophy, history, even some English novels. "It's wonderful. It's yours. While you're here, I mean. Use it whenever you want. And if you'd like, I can arrange for you to take classes, university courses, online or in person. Whatever subjects interest you." Elena turned to stare at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because your grandmother told me you'd wanted to be a teacher. Because you gave up your education when your family needed you to work. Because now you have a chance to reclaim something you lost." He moved to the window, looking out at the city. "Elena, I can give you many things. Safety, money, opportunities. But I can't give you purpose or passion. Those you must find for yourself. I'm simply offering you the space and resources to look." "And what do you get out of this arrangement?" Dante smiled. "The satisfaction of keeping my promise to a woman who saved my life, and perhaps the pleasure of watching someone rediscover their dreams. Is that so hard to believe? From a Mafia boss?" "Yes." "Don," he corrected mildly, "and I suppose I can't blame you for skepticism, but time will prove I'm sincere." For now, call your parents, then explore the house, the library, the city if you'd like, though I'd ask that you take one of my guards with you when you leave the property, not to control you, but to ensure you're safe. Safe from what? From gossip, mostly. News of what happened at your wedding will spread. Some people will be curious, some will be malicious. It's better if they see you're under my protection from the start. After Dante left, Eleanor used the new phone to call home. Her mother answered on the first ring. "Elena, oh thank God, we've been so worried." "I'm fine, Mama, I'm safe. I'm at Don Caruso's palazzo, and it's actually beautiful here." "But Elena, what happens now? Everyone in the village is talking. Some say you've been kidnapped, others that you ran away with a lover, still others that, well, the stories are getting wilder." "Let them talk, Mama. It doesn't matter what people in Santa Lucia think anymore. What matters is that I'm not married to Marco, and I'm not going to be humiliated for the rest of my life because of him. Your father is still angry. He thinks we should come get you, bring you home. Home to what? To be the woman whose husband cheated on her at their wedding, to work at the shop and hear whispers behind my back for the next 40 years. No, I'm staying here, at least for now." No, they talked for another 20 minutes, Elena reassuring her mother repeatedly that she was safe, that Dante had been nothing but respectful, that this was her choice. By the end, Francesca seemed cautiously accepting, though still worried. "Your grandmother would have liked this," Francesca said finally. "She always said you needed to leave the village to see more of life. I thought she just meant visiting other places, but maybe she meant something bigger." "Maybe she did, Mama." The next few days established a routine. Elena woke late, not used to the luxury of sleeping without an alarm. She'd eat breakfast with Signora Marta in the kitchen. The older woman was a fountain of harmless gossip about Palermo society and clearly enjoyed having someone to chat with. Then Elena would spend hours in the library, reading, sometimes researching universities and their programs. Dante was often busy with his business, a word that covered a multitude of activities Elena suspected she was better off not knowing about in detail. But he made time each evening to dine with her, their conversations ranging from books they'd both read to her plans for the future, to his stories of growing up in this palazzo with parents who'd tried to give him a normal childhood despite their involvement in the family business. "My mother hated it," Dante told her one evening as they sat on the terrace after dinner, the city lights twinkling below. "The violence, the constant danger, the moral compromises. She tried to convince my father to leave, to take their money and start over somewhere else. Why didn't they? Because in this life, you don't just leave. There's no retirement, no graceful exit. My father was born into this family, this tradition. He tried to be better than his own father, more strategic, less brutal, and he succeeded to a degree, but he was still what he was." Dante swirled the wine in his glass. "He was killed when I was 19. Car bomb. My mother died 3 years later. Heart attack officially, but I think she died of a broken heart. I'm sorry. Don't be. They lived by their choices, and they understood the consequences. As do I." He looked at her directly. "Does it bother you, knowing what I am, what I do?" Elena considered the question honestly. "It should, but you've been nothing but kind to me. You kept your promise to my grandmother. You're giving me opportunities I never thought I'd have. It's hard to reconcile that with the image of a crime lord. We're all contradictions, Elena. Good and bad, light and dark. The question is which side we feed, which actions we choose when we have a choice." A week passed, then 2. Elena began venturing into the city with her assigned guard, a quiet man named Paolo who stayed close but not oppressively so. She visited bookstores, cafes, museums. She enrolled in 2 online courses, Italian literature and early childhood education. The classes were challenging after years away from formal study, but she loved them. Marco signed the annulment papers without protest. Elena heard through her mother that he'd left Santa Lucia, gone to live with Valentina in Messina. Good riddance. One evening, about 3 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, Dante asked Elena to join him for dinner at a restaurant in the city. "Not here at home," he said. "Out, publicly, if you're comfortable with that." "Why publicly?" "Because I want people to see that you're here by choice, that you're thriving, because the whispers and speculation should end, replaced with something closer to truth." The restaurant was elegant. Linen tablecloths, soft lighting, waiters who clearly knew Dante well. People watched their entrance, heads turning, whispers following them. But when they saw Elena laughing at something Dante said, when they saw him pull out her chair and treat her with obvious respect, the whispers changed tone. "They're going to think we're together," Elena said after they'd ordered. "Romantically, I mean. Does that bother you?" "Shouldn't it? I barely know you. And until 3 weeks ago, I was married. That marriage never counted. We both know that." Dante leaned forward slightly. "But to answer your question, yes, people will speculate. That's natural. What matters is what's actually true." "And what is actually true?" "That I care about your well-being, that I enjoy your company, that I find you intelligent and interesting. Beyond that," he shrugged, "beyond that, I think we're two people getting to know each other, and neither of us needs to define what that means yet." Elena felt her cheeks warm. Over the past weeks, she'd become comfortable with Dante. His presence no longer intimidated her. She'd even begun to look forward to their evening conversations, to the way he listened when she talked about her classes, to his dry sense of humor that emerged once he relaxed. "I was married for 3 hours, Elena said quietly. "I've now been living in your house for 3 weeks. Which relationship is more real?" "This one," Dante answered without hesitation. "Because it's based on honesty and choice, not desperation and social pressure." The evening stretched pleasantly. They talked about everything and nothing. Her childhood memories of visiting Palermo with her grandmother, his complicated relationship with his position as Don. The future Elena was tentatively beginning to imagine for herself. When they returned to the palazzo, Dante walked her to her door, a routine they'd established, his way of ensuring she felt safe in his home. "Thank you," Elena said, "for dinner, for all of this. I know I haven't said it enough, but thank you for seeing me that day in Santa Lucia, for not letting me stay trapped in that situation. I promised your grandmother. Besides, selfishly, I'm glad you're here. The house is less lonely with you in it." Elena surprised herself by reaching out and touching his arm. "You're a good man, Dante Caruso. I don't think you let many people see that, but you are." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, pleasure, maybe something deeper. "Don't spread that rumor. It would ruin my reputation." They stood there for a moment, Elena's hand still on his arm, the air between them charged with something undefined but significant. Then Dante stepped back, breaking the spell. "Good night, Elena." "Good night." In her room, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how much had changed. A month ago, she'd been preparing to marry Marco, to settle into a life of quiet disappointment. Now she was living in a palazzo, taking classes, seeing the world through new eyes, and she was developing feelings for Dante Caruso. That realization should have terrified her. He was dangerous, powerful, involved in things she didn't fully understand and probably shouldn't. But he was also kind to her, respectful, interesting. He challenged her to think, to dream, to become more than she'd allowed herself to be. The next morning, Elena found Signora Marta in the kitchen looking distressed. "Is something wrong?" Elena asked. "Don Caruso is in a meeting, a difficult one. There are men here. They don't come often, but when they do, it means trouble." Elena glanced toward the wing of the house where Dante's office was located. She'd been told to avoid that area when he was conducting business, and she'd respected that boundary. But curiosity now warred with caution. "What kind of trouble?" Marta hesitated, then clearly decided Elena had a right to know. "There's a man from Catania. He's been trying to expand his territory into Palermo. Don Caruso has been resisting. This meeting is supposed to resolve the dispute, but," she lowered her voice, Sometimes these meetings don't end peacefully. Elena felt cold fear grip her. She'd been insulated from the darker aspects of Dante's life, but now they were forcing their way into her awareness. The meeting lasted hours. Elena tried to focus on her reading, on her coursework, but her mind kept drifting. Around 3 in the afternoon, she heard cars starting, voices, the sounds of departure. Then silence. She found Dante in his office, alone. He looked exhausted, tension evident in every line of his body. There was a cut on his cheek, blood dried at the corner of his mouth. "What happened?" Eleanor asked from the doorway. "Nothing that need concern you. You're bleeding." "It's superficial." But he winced when he moved, suggesting other injuries less visible. Elena crossed the room without invitation, picking up the first aid kit she noticed on a shelf. Signora Marta must keep it there for occasions like this. "Sit," she commanded. Dante looked surprised but obeyed, settling into his desk chair. Elena carefully cleaned the cut on his face, her touch gentle. This close, she could see other marks, bruises forming on his jaw, his neck. "The man from Catania," she said. "Is he still a problem?" "No, we reached an understanding." "Did that understanding require violence?" "It required me to demonstrate that I'm not weak, that Palermo won't be taken through intimidation." Dante caught her hand as she dabbed at his lip. "Elena, this is my world. This is what I do. I tried to shield you from it, but you deserve to know the truth. I'm not a good man in the way most people define it. I've hurt people. I'll likely hurt more people before my life ends." "I know." Elena didn't pull her hand away. "I know what you are. But I also know how you've treated me, how you've kept your promise, how you've given me space to grow. Those things matter too." "Do they? Or am I just fooling you into thinking I'm better than I am?" "Stop," Eleanor said firmly. "Stop trying to push me away. I'm not a child. I can decide for myself what I think of you." Dante pulled her closer, not roughly but deliberately. She ended up standing between his knees, her hands on his shoulders, his hands gentle at her waist. "And what do you think of me, Elena?" "I think you're complicated. I think you do terrible things for reasons you believe are justified. I think you carry the weight of your world on your shoulders and rarely let anyone see how heavy it is. And I think," she paused, then continued, "I think I'm falling for you, and that scares me more than anything else." For a long moment, Dante just looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face. Then he pulled her down and kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper when she responded. His mouth tasted of blood and wine, his hands careful despite their evident strength. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Eleanor rested her forehead against his. "This is madness," she whispered. "Yes. I barely know you. Yes. You're a crime lord." "Don," he corrected automatically, and she laughed despite the intensity of the moment. "What are we doing, Dante?" "I don't know. But I know I haven't felt this way since Lucia died. I know I look forward to dinner every evening because I get to talk with you. I know I want to protect you, not just because of my promise, but because the thought of anything happening to you." He didn't finish the sentence. "I'm supposed to be focusing on myself, on my education, on building a future," Elena said. "Getting involved with you complicates everything." "Then don't. I'll keep my distance. I'll still honor my commitment to help you. But we can maintain boundaries." Elena pulled back to look at him properly. "Is that what you want? Boundaries?" "No, but what I want shouldn't dictate your choices. You need to do what's right for you." "What if what's right for me includes you?" Dante smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. "Then I would be the luckiest man in Sicily." They kissed again, slower this time, tender. When Elena finally left his office, her head was spinning. This was crazy. This was reckless. This was nothing like the safe, predictable life she'd almost settled for with Marco. This was real. The next weeks passed in a haze of discovery. Elena continued her classes, now with Dante, sometimes sitting with her in the library, reading his own books while she studied. They took walks in the garden, had long dinners with conversation that stretched late into the night, discovered shared loves and comfortable silences. Dante was careful not to overwhelm her, giving her space when she needed it, but their relationship deepened naturally. Elena met some of his associates, men who treated her with careful respect, clearly aware that she was important to their Don. She learned more about his work, though he still shielded her from the worst of it. One afternoon, about 2 months after the almost wedding, Elena's mother called. "Elena, I'm in Palermo, at the train station. Can I see you?" "Mama? Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" "Because I needed to see for myself. To see you, to see this life you're living. Your father is still angry, but I need to know you're truly all right." Elena had Paolo drive her to the station. Her mother stood on the platform, looking lost and worried, clutching her worn handbag. When she saw Elena, her expression transformed. Because Elena looked different. She wore clothes that fit properly, that made her look elegant rather than merely presentable. Her hair was styled better, her posture more confident. But more than the external changes, there was something in her eyes, a brightness that had been missing for years. "Mama," Elena embraced her mother tightly. "You look happy," Francesca said wonderingly. "Truly happy." "I am. Show me. Show me this new life." They spent the afternoon together. Elena showed her mother the palazzo, the library, introduced her to Signora Marta, who insisted on making them lunch. Francesca's eyes grew wider with each room, each revelation of the world Elena now inhabited. "And Don Caruso?" Francesca asked carefully. "He treats you well." "More than well, Mama." "Elena, do you love him?" It was the first time anyone had asked directly. Elena thought about the question, about Dante's rare smiles, his careful respect, the way he listened when she talked about her dreams, the heat of his kisses, the tenderness in his touch. "Yes," she admitted, "I do. And he loves you." "He hasn't said it, but I think so. I hope so." Francesca looked troubled. "This life, Elena, it's so different from what we knew. Dangerous, uncertain. Was my life in Santa Lucia truly safe? Or was it just a different kind of danger? The slow death of settling for less than I deserved?" Her mother had no answer to that. Before she left, Francesca hugged Elena tightly. "Your grandmother would be proud. She'd be laughing too, I think. She always did have a flair for the dramatic. She saved his life, you know. Dante's. She didn't have to, but she did, and now he's saved mine. Then perhaps this is how it was meant to be." That evening, Elena told Dante about her mother's visit. "She didn't seem scandalized by my Don status?" Dante asked with amusement. "She was more impressed by your library. A woman of excellent priorities." They were in the library now, Elena curled in one of the comfortable chairs with a book, Dante working at the desk on some business matter. It was domestic, comfortable, something Elena had never imagined she'd have. "Dante? When I first came here, you said I could stay until I was strong enough to protect myself, until I knew what I wanted. I think I know now." He looked up, giving her his full attention. "And? I want to finish my degree. I want to become a teacher. I want to open a school someday here in Palermo for children whose families can't afford private education." The words came faster now, excitement building. "I want to travel, to see more of the world. I want to read every book in this library and then find more. I want to learn to cook properly, to speak better English, to—" "And?" Dante interrupted gently. "What else do you want, Elena?" She met his eyes. "I want you. I want this. Whatever this is, whatever it becomes. I want to stay, not because I'm afraid to leave, but because I choose to be here." Dante rose from the desk and crossed to her chair. He knelt beside it, taking her hand. "Elena Rossi, I've lived most of my life alone, by choice, because I believed love was a liability in my world. I was wrong. You've become essential to me. I love you. Will you stay, not as my guest or someone I'm protecting, but as my partner, my equal?" "Yes," Eleanor whispered. "Yes, I'll stay. He kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring everything he couldn't say into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, both were shaking slightly. "There's something you should know," Dante said, still holding her close. "The Don of Catania, the one I met with, he has a daughter. A few months ago, his people approached me about an arranged marriage between us. It would have united territories, prevented conflicts. I refused because I couldn't imagine being tied to someone I didn't know, didn't love. And now I'm glad I refused. Now I know what it's like to choose love freely, not because of duty or strategy or family pressure." He smiled. "Your grandmother would approve, I think. She'd say about time someone in this family married for love," Elena agreed. "Then she'd probably lecture you about treating me right and threaten you with her wooden spoon. I would have accepted that lecture gladly. I owe her everything." The months that followed were the happiest of Elena's life. She threw herself into her studies, eventually applying to the University of Palermo and being accepted. Dante supported her completely, proud of her accomplishments. They navigated the complicated balance of his dangerous work and their relationship, Elena learning when to ask questions and when to let him protect her from the darker aspects of his world. The annulment was finalized. Elena Rossi was legally single again, the brief marriage to Marco Bellini erased from official records. Marco himself had apparently married Valentina in a quick ceremony and moved to Messina permanently. Elena wished them well, genuinely, that life felt like it had happened to someone else entirely. 1 year after the almost wedding, Dante asked Elena to marry him. Not in a grand public gesture, but quietly, in the library, over the books that had become the foundation of her new life. "I want to do this properly," he said. "I want your father's blessing, a real wedding, all of it. But more than anything, I want you to know that choosing you was the best decision I've ever made. Will you marry me, Elena?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. The wedding took place in a small chapel in Palermo 6 months later. Elena wore a dress that was truly beautiful this time, elegant in its simplicity. Her parents came, her father having finally accepted that his daughter had found something real and precious. Dante's associates filled half the pews. Dangerous men in expensive suits, paying their respects to their Don's bride, but it was the front row that made Elena cry as she walked down the aisle. Signora Marta sat there, beaming, and next to where her grandmother should have been, an empty chair held a single white rose and a small photo of Nonna Sofia, smiling her knowing smile. "She's here," Dante whispered when Elena reached him at the altar. "She kept her promise, and so did I." The ceremony was brief, the vows simple but meaningful. When Father Giuseppe, a different priest from a Palermo parish Dante supported, pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss was tender and full of promise. At the reception, held at the Palazzo in gardens transformed by flowers and lights, Elena stood with Dante, greeting guests, accepting congratulations. She caught sight of herself in a mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back, confident, radiant, loved. "Happy?" Dante asked, his arm around her waist. "More than I ever imagined possible. Even married to a Don?" Eleanor laughed. "Especially married to a Don, though I'm still going to finish my degree and open that school. I wouldn't have it any other way. You'll be the most educated, most determined Don's wife Palermo has ever seen." As the evening wore on, Elena found herself standing alone for a moment, looking out at the city lights. She thought about the girl who'd stood in a different wedding hall a year ago, humiliated and hopeless. She thought about her grandmother's strange intuition that had led to all of this. She thought about the stranger who'd walked through doors and changed everything. "Thank you, Nonna," she whispered to the night air. "You knew exactly what you were doing." A hand slipped into hers, Dante's, warm and sure. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead to the best. That humiliation can become salvation. That the paths we're supposed to take aren't always the ones we expect." Deep thoughts for a wedding night. Elena turned to face him, this man who'd claimed her in front of everyone, who'd kept his promise to a dying woman, who'd given her space to become who she was meant to be. I love you, Dante Caruso. And I love you, Elena Caruso. Though you'll always be Elena Rossi to me, the woman brave enough to accept my offer, smart enough to challenge me, kind enough to see past what I am to who I'm trying to be. They stood together as the party continued behind them. Two people who'd found each other through the most unlikely circumstances, bound now by choice and love, and the memory of an old woman who'd saved a stranger's life. 5 years later, Eleanor stood in front of her school, La Scuola Sofia, named for her grandmother. It was modest but well-equipped, serving children from neighborhoods where education was often sacrificed to economic necessity. Dante had funded it, but Elena ran it, her teaching degree finally put to use in service of the dream she'd once thought impossible. She was pregnant with their first child, a daughter they planned to name Sophia. Life was full, complicated, occasionally dangerous but never dull. She'd learned to navigate the complexities of being married to one of Sicily's most powerful men, to accept the guards that followed her, to understand that some questions were better left unasked. But she'd never compromised on the things that mattered: her work, her education, her relationship with her parents, her own identity. Dante had never asked her to. That was part of why she loved him, why their marriage worked. Her phone rang. Dante calling. "How was the first day?" he asked. "Perfect. Chaotic, but perfect. The children are wonderful. I think Nonna would have loved seeing this." "She's seeing it," Dante said confidently. "And she's smiling that knowing smile of hers, probably saying, 'I told you so' to everyone in heaven." Elena laughed. "Probably. Will you be home for dinner?" "Always. I have a meeting first, but I'll be there." "I love you, Elena." "I love you too." As she hung up, one of the children, a little girl named Rosa, who reminded Elena of herself at that age, tugged on her sleeve. "Signora Caruso, can you tell us a story?" "What kind of story?" Elena asked. "A true one, about how you met your husband." Elena smiled. "All right, gather everyone. This is a good story, but it starts with something difficult. It starts with a day when I thought my life was ending, but it was actually just beginning." And as the children settled to listen, Elena began to tell them about humiliation and salvation, about strangers who became family, about promises kept and lives changed, about her grandmother's final gift. Because some stories were worth telling, especially the true ones, especially the ones that reminded people that life could surprise you, that endings could become beginnings, that sometimes being rescued meant finding the courage to save yourself. Final reflection. This story explores one of life's profound truths. Our lowest moments can become the doorways to our greatest transformations. Elena's public humiliation, which should have been the worst day of her life, became the catalyst for discovering her true self and genuine happiness. Think about the courage it took for her to walk away from everything familiar, to trust a stranger, to choose uncertainty over comfortable misery. How many of us stay in situations that diminish us because we're afraid of what others will think, because we've invested time or emotion, because leaving feels harder than staying? Elena's story reminds us that dignity matters more than stability, that self-respect isn't negotiable, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing we can do is play it safe. She could have stayed in Santa Lucia, endured the whispers, accepted a life of quiet disappointment. Instead, she chose to be brave. But notice, she wasn't passive in her own rescue. Dante offered an escape, but Elena made the choice to walk through that door. She did the work to rebuild her life. The education, the personal growth, the emotional healing. She didn't exchange one dependency for another. She became strong enough to stand beside Dante as an equal. This is the real lesson. Salvation comes in unexpected forms, but we must still do the work ourselves. We must still choose courage over comfort, growth over stagnation, authentic love over convenient lies. Elena's grandmother understood something essential, that sometimes you have to intervene in someone's life, that sometimes love means saving someone from their own fear of being alone, even if your intervention comes from beyond the grave. She saw her granddaughter settling for less and used her final gift to ensure Eleanor got the chance to become who she was meant to be. So ask yourself, what are you settling for? What humiliation are you enduring because it feels safer than change? What door would you walk through if someone offered you the chance? And what's stopping you from walking through it without waiting for permission? Life rarely gives us dramatic interventions. Most of us won't have a Don walk through our wedding to claim us. But the choice Elena made is available to everyone. The choice to honor ourselves enough to demand better, to be brave enough to start over, to trust that uncertainty beats the slow death of a life half-lived. Your grandmother might not be there to orchestrate your rescue, but you can rescue yourself. You can walk through those doors on your own. You can choose dignity over humiliation, possibility over resignation, love over fear. Sometimes the best decision you'll ever make is the one that terrifies you. Sometimes being saved means finding the courage to leave. Sometimes your real life doesn't begin until you're brave enough to end the wrong one. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own choices and possibilities, please subscribe to our channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you don't need permission to honor yourself, to demand respect, to choose a life worth living. That choice is always yours.